All right, today we're diving into a really radical idea that completely reshaped philosophy. We're talking about Edmund Husserl's logical investigations, a work born out of a crisis that, and I'm not exaggerating here, threatened the very idea of truth itself.
So let me ask you something that gets right to the heart of all of this. Is a simple truth like 2 plus 2 equals 4 true just because, our brains are wired to think so? Or is it an objective fact about the universe, something that would be true even if we weren't around to think about it?
Now that might sound like a kind of weird, abstract question, right? But believe it or not, about 100 years ago, this was a huge, serious debate. There was this really popular theory going around that suggested that all truth, even logic itself, was just a product of our psychology. I mean, think about that. It challenged the very idea of objective truth. And the stakes, well, they couldn't have been higher.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we need to introduce the philosophical villain of our story, so to speak. This whole crisis was kicked off by a really powerful theory called psychologism.
So what exactly is psychologism? Well, in a nutshell, it's the idea that the laws of logic, they're not absolute. They're basically just descriptions of how the human mind happens to think. So, logic isn't some universal truth about reality, it's just a branch of psychology. And this comparison here really lays out the problem perfectly. You see, on one side, you've got a psychological fact, like I feel anxious when I see a spider. That's totally subjective, right? It's about my personal experience. But on the other side, you've got a logical law, like a statement can't be both true and false at the same time. That feels objective, absolute. What psychologism was doing was trying to say that this absolute truth was really just another subjective mental habit, like feeling anxious. It was blurring that line.
And this is why it was such a big deal. Think about the implications. If logic is just human psychology, then truth itself becomes relative. I mean, what's true for us humans might be totally false for some other kind of being out there. All of a sudden, the entire foundation of science and mathematics isn't objective reality anymore. It's just a fluke, a biological accident of how our brains evolved.
So into this intellectual crisis steps our hero, a philosopher named Edmund Husserl. And what makes his story so fascinating, so compelling, is that he actually started out on the wrong side of this very fight. You can actually trace his whole journey. So back in 1891, Husserl publishes his philosophy of arithmetic, and it is just steeped in this psychologistic way of thinking. But then a few years later, he gets this absolutely savage critical review from the great logician Gottlob Frege. And that critique, it hit him hard. It sparked this profound change, and by 1900, he does a complete 180, publishing his breakthrough work, Logical Investigations, the very book that would completely demolish the theory he used to champion.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures his new mission. He quotes Goethe, saying, "There is nothing to which one is more severe than the errors that one has just abandoned." You can almost feel the passion there, can't you? He wasn't just arguing against some abstract theory. He was fighting against his former self.
Okay, so how did he do it? What was the core of this revolutionary argument that just completely turned the tables on psychologism? Husserl's central claim was actually pretty simple, but totally profound. He said that logical truths are ideal. Now, what does that mean? It means they aren't physical things, but they're not just psychological events inside our heads either. Think of them like numbers or geometric shapes. They're these timeless, unchanging concepts that exist completely independently of any mind thinking about them. And he puts it so powerfully in his own words. He says, "What is true is absolutely intrinsically true. Truth is one and the same, whether men or non-men, angels or gods apprehend and judge it." You see, truth isn't just truth for humans. It's just truth, period. Now, to really drive this point home, Husserl used this brilliant example involving Napoleon. So have a look here. We've got two totally different expressions, right? The victor of Jena and the vanquished at Waterloo. They obviously have different meanings, what Husserl calls ideal senses. I mean, one's about winning a battle, the other is about losing one. But, and this is the kicker, they both point to the very same object, Napoleon Bonaparte. What this proves is that meaning is its own thing. It's this ideal concept that's separate from both the actual words we use and the objects out there in the world. So this distinction is absolutely crucial. You have the expression, that's just the words, you have the object, the actual person or thing, and then you have the meaning, that timeless ideal concept that bridges the gap between them. So Husserl's critique was absolutely devastating for psychologism. But he wasn't just interested in tearing down the old theory.
No, he built something new in its place. He proposed a whole new way of doing philosophy.
But this, of course, leads to the big question, right? If all these logical truths and ideal meanings exist outside of our own heads, outside our own psychological experiences, then how in the world do our minds actually grasp them?
Husserl's answer is a key concept he called intentionality. He said, look, consciousness isn't some passive box that just holds our thoughts. That's the wrong way to think about it. Its very nature is to be active. It's always directed towards something. Every single mental act is like an aiming, a pointing, an intending.
And this is his foundational principle right here. Consciousness is always consciousness of something. It's never just empty, blank awareness. It's always consciousness of a person, an idea, a memory, a number. It's inherently outward pointing, always reaching out to the world, and, yes, to these ideal truths.
So, based on this powerful idea of intentionality, Husserl founded an entire new school of philosophy, phenomenology, and its goal was revolutionary. It was to get back to the things themselves. To do that, you had to carefully describe experiences exactly as they appear to you before you slap on all your scientific or cultural assumptions. You could almost call it a science of experience itself.
And the impact of this massive breakthrough, all of it stemming from his battle against psychologism, was, well, it was nothing short of monumental.
That year, 1900, when Husserl published Logical Investigations, it really marks a true turning point in history. I mean it. Philosophy before that book and philosophy after it are like two completely different landscapes.
The legacy of this one book is just immense. For starters, it launched the entire phenomenological movement, which went on to influence huge thinkers like Heidegger and Sartre. It so completely and utterly dismantled psychologism that the theory basically vanished from serious philosophy. And on top of all that, its ideas became this rich source that would feed both major philosophical traditions, analytic and continental, for the next 100 years.
So, Husserl's battle for truth fundamentally changed how we understand everything: logic, consciousness, reality itself. And it leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. If things like truth and meaning really do exist in some ideal realm beyond our own minds, what else might we be missing?